Good evening, Margot and Chagai. Good evening, Marjorie and Dwayne. Good evening, Jim. Good evening, Erica in Norway. Just a moment here. So YouTube should be live. Very good. Okay, YouTube's live. Let me just share it on the Facebook pages and we will be gegangen. Gonna mute everybody. Oh, let me let Mitchell in. Good evening, Danielle. What a beautiful crowd gathering together to learn some Torah. Okay, just one more share. And we're gonna be gegangen. Okay. It's good anyhow. We gave people time to join. Good evening, Mendel, who's with me here in the shul. He's not scared of catching any diseases from me, so he's happy to come in person. I'm grateful for that. And it's a beautiful summer night in Bozeman. Baruch Hashem, I managed to make it back from my traversing the country, dropping off children in camp. I was in New York on Sunday and Monday and Detroit yesterday to drop off many. And now I'm back in Bozeman since late last night. And excited, better than ever, to learn some Torah, to learn some Parsha. And we find ourselves in Parshat Chukat, or as we Ashkenazim like to call it, Chukas. And amongst the many things that Chukas addresses, it addresses some of the invasions. In other words, when the Jews were in the Transjordan, let me give some background before we even get to the verses, because it's important. When the Jews were still on the east side of the Jordan River, and Moses was still alive, leading them. Actually, in this week's Torah portion, Aaron passes away. We read about Miriam passing away. But Moses is alive. He's their leader. And they're now going to encounter various nations that are controlling the territory in the Transjordan and how they interacted with each one of these nations differently, which I think first and foremost is an important lesson about individuality. Not every group needs to be addressed in the same way that other groups are addressed. You have to be able to treat every situation accordingly. Now, in Moses' case, God gave them direction in how to deal with the different situations. But in general in life, it's a good idea not to make generalizations and to deal with each individual group according to how they need to be dealt with. But I'd like to address even a bigger issue, and we'll get to it throughout the class, and that is vulnerability always a good thing? You know, for those of you that hang around here long enough, for those that follow Chavi on Instagram, you know that we are big believers that vulnerability, when a person can be vulnerable about reality, it's healthy for human progress. It's healthy for human growth. The question is, are there times that vulnerability is a downside? In other words, that vulnerability is not a sign of strength, but a sign of weakness. And I know that Brene Brown was watching tonight. She may wholeheartedly disagree with me, but that's okay. I don't come from the school of Brene Brown. I come from the school of Torah. When Brene Brown says something that the Torah that is in sync with Torah, I'm a big fan. When she says something or other people say things that are not in sync with Torah, I'm not such a big fan. And so we're going to address that, but first we have to get some of the foundations down. And what I share with you tonight, obviously aside from the basic verses in the book of Numbers, is based on an incredible talk from the Rebbe that he addressed in the summer of 1965. So if you look on page 943 in the live Chumash that we use in the shul, which is this Chumash, I'm going to read a few verses. It says, I guess it's chapter 20, verse 14. Moses sent messengers from Kadesh to the king of Edom. Quote, "This is what your brother Israel said. You know of all the hardship that has befallen us. Our fathers went down to Egypt. We stayed in Egypt for a long time, and the Egyptians mistreated us. And our patriarchs were pained in the grave. We cried out to God, and he heard our voice. He sent an angel, Moses, and he took us out of Egypt. Now we are in Kadesh, a city on the edge of your border." Right? This is all an introduction in their messaging to the Edomites. There was an introduction about how we were in Egypt and how hard it was, and Moses let us out. Now we are in Kadesh, a city on the edge of your border. Please let us pass through your land so we can reach the land of Israel. We will not pass through your fields or vineyards, even though we have our own supply of water. We will not drink water from our well, but we will purchase it from you. Meaning, even though we have water, we'll do good business with you. It'll be good for you. We will go along the king's highway, and we will muzzle our animals so they do not turn to the right or to the left to eat from the fields until we pass through your border. So Edom replies, the king of Edom and his people reply to Edomites, you will not pass through my territory, or I'll go out towards you with the sword. So we're being all nice and cozy, and by the way, this is our story. We're a good people. We suffered a lot. Be a little kind to us. We don't even want anything. We'll pay for it. You don't dare come near our property, our territory, or we'll come out with the sword. We'll go to war with you. So the children of Israel didn't give up. It says the children of Israel said to him, the king of Edom, through the messengers, we will keep to the highway. If either we or our cattle drink your water, we will pay whatever it costs. Nothing will harm you. We will pass through on foot. Don't worry about it. You don't have to, there's nothing you should be worried about. But he said, the king of Edom, you will not pass through. And Edom came out towards them with many men and the strong hand of Esau. Since Edom refused to allow Israel to cross his border, Israel headed away from him. So they didn't end up going through the area in the Transjordan controlled by the Edomites because they were threatened. So they tried being nice. They tried being nice twice, and they were not. It was not reciprocated by the Edomites. But then we go towards the end of the Torah portion, the seventh reading on page 951. It says, Israel sent messengers to Sichon, the king of the Amorites, saying, let me pass through your land. We will not turn to any fields or vineyards, nor drink water from the well. We will walk along the king's highway until we have passed through your border. So similar, they didn't talk about Egypt, but the similar request, but Sichon did not permit Israel to pass through his borders. Sichon gathered all his people and went out to the desert toward Israel. He came to Yatzah and fought against Israel. Israel struck him with the sword and took possession of his land from Arnon to Yaboik, as far as Ammon's descendants, because the border of Ammon's descendants was strong. So Sichon, Melech HaAmoiri, Sichon, the king of the Amorites in the Ammonite land, he does the same thing, says, I'll go to war, except this time the Jews fight him, unlike what they did with the Edomites, and they beat him. They take all the land from Sichon. They knock Sichon out of the park. Interesting. Then it continues, and it says, there was Sichon, then there was Og, the king of Bashan. And that's later in the parsha, literally towards the end. It says, they struck him down. They struck down Og, as well as his sons and all his people. No survivors remained. They took possession of his land. So we don't mess with Edom. We do mess with Sichon, the king of Amorites, and Og, the king of Bashan, all on the Transjordan. And then when you look at next week's Torah portion, it begins, again, and I'm only bringing this for context, the first verse of next week's Torah portion of Balak. It says, Balak, the son of Tzipor, saw everything that Israel had done to the Amorites. Moab became terrified because they were numerous. In fact, because of the children of Israel, Moab became sick of their own life. The Moabites became sick of their own life. And so then they had to figure out what to do. And that's when the king of Moab, Balak, tries the entire next week's parsha to hire the Midianite prophet Balaam to curse the Jews, and it never works. So we really have four nations, specifically four nations that we're talking about: the Edomites, the Amorites, the Bashanites, and the Moabites. That's the primary four. I mean, of course, there's the Ammonites and others, but we're going to focus tonight on these four. So we have to be very, very scrupulous in our reading of these verses, because like everything in the Torah, there is no such thing that is casual. Everything has a reason. There's a reason why the verses say what they do in the exact form in which they do. And just to give you an example here, let's look at some of the primary differences between the words used when dealing with the Edomites, with the family of Esau, right? Jacob had a brother Esau, and his descendants were the Edomites living in Edom. which, if my memory serves me right, it was in the southeastern part of the Transjordan, versus the northern ones, which were the Bashanites and the Amorites living north, also in the Transjordan, but further away from Egypt, further away from Jordan, and closer to Syria. So let's like this. First of all, when they send messengers to the Edomites, to the family of Esau, it says, Vayishlach Moshe Malachim. Moses sent messengers. When it came to Sichon, to the kings, to the two giants in the north, the Bashanites and the Amorites, it says, Vayishlach Yisrael Malachim. The Israelites sent messengers, not Moses, but the Israelites, in the plural, the whole community. Why by the Edomites does it say that Moses sent them? And by the kings in the north, the giants in the north, does it say that the Jews sent them? Number two, why when it came to the Edomites was their entire introduction about Egypt? We were slaves in Egypt and Moses took us out. And when it comes to the Amorites, the Sichon and Og, the Bashanites, it doesn't say anything. There's no history. There's no background story. It's, by the way, we'd like to go through your land. We're willing to pay for whatever water we drink. We won't trample. We'll walk by foot, right? But there was no mention of the history. Why? Why the Edomites get a history lesson? And do the Amorites, led by Sichon, and the Bashanites, led by Og, not get a history lesson? Number three, when we're going to the Edomites, when we're going to the family of Esau, it says the word Nabra Na. Na means please. We beseech you, please let us cross your land. When it comes to the Amorites, the Sichon, it doesn't say any please. So what happened? We gave up on being polite. The next nation of the Edomites get our Jewish politeness, but the Amorites and the Bashanites don't. And number four, when the Edomites say no, right? They said, no, we don't want you to cross our land. The Jews try again. It says, we'll go up on the highway. But when it comes to the Sichonites, to the Amorites led by Sichon and the Bashanites led by Og, there's no second try. We try once, they say no, and we go to war and we kick their you-know-what. Why by the Edomites did we try twice with the same request, even though they already made it clear, A, that they don't want us to, and B, that if we tried, they would come out to us with a sword. Everything in Torah is exact. And, if you read the verses, it looks like, oh, the Jews try to mess with this group, but they try to go through here. In other words, if you don't look at the nuances of the particulars in each one of the nations the Jews are going to conquer, it seems like it's all the same. We tried with them, okay, they didn't let, we went here. Okay, we fought with one, we didn't fight with the others. But by one of them, we tried again before we went to war. The other one, we said, please. This one, we didn't say please. This one, we didn't give our history, but this one we did. There are differences, real differences, but why? So in this incredible talk of 1965, the Rebbe says as follows. There was a big difference in principle, in the foundation between the two types of messaging, meaning the messaging that we were doing towards the Sichonites. I said the Sichonites. I meant the Amorites led by Sichon, and what we were trying to do with the Edomites, the Esau's family. We were told, and it's a clear verse in the book of Deuteronomy, we were told regarding Edom, the Edomites, we are not allowed to go to war with them. It says, Al tizgaru bam, don't enrage them, because I will not give you from their land even the stepping of a foot. We are not to go into the land of Edom with even to lay our feet on their territory without their permission. Certainly not to enrage them, certainly not to instigate them. Why? Because they're family. And so if they're family, we don't mess. And if that's the case, the only way we would be permitted to get through the land of Edom was to get permission. We're not allowed to go to war with them. That's prohibited from us. So if you have to get permission, so you have two options. Either they're going to give you permission, or you're going to have to go a roundabout way and circumvent them without going onto their territory, which is exactly what happened at the end. They did not allow us to go in, so we circumvented. We went all the way around, which made it a much longer trip. Therefore, the Jews, knowing that they're not going to be able to go to war with them, meaning their only option is
to either get them to agree for us to come through or to go around, they figured we should try twice. If they say no, we might as well try twice, because maybe we'll convince them the second time, because otherwise we know what the other option is. And there is only one other option, which is to go around, which is going to take much longer. Therefore, it's worth our second try, because war is never an option with the Edomites. We don't go to war with our family. With the Amorites, on the other hand, the Amorites were not our brothers, not even related. The Amorites were, for the most part, enemies. They were part of the Canaanites, the Amorites. A lot of these nations had similar names, and therefore, when it came to the Amorites, it says you're allowed. We were never told by Hashem, by God, that we're not allowed to go to war with the Amorites, and therefore, we knew that if Hashem said we can go to war with them, that means we would have the blessing and the success from Hashem to beat them at war. We'll have godly success. So we tried once. We try to be nice. We always want to try to be a path of peace. We are Jews, and Jews always seek peace. Therefore, the first thing we did with Sichon, the Amorites, is we said, hey, listen, we'd like to come through your land peacefully. We will pay for whatever we take. We mean no harm. We'll just come through. And they said, no, we'll go to war. I'm not going to ask you twice. Why would I ask you twice? I know that if you mess with me and I have to fight with you, I'm going to succeed, because God never told me not to have war with you. And like every other nation that stands in our way on the way to Israel, we're going to win. So I'm going to do my due diligence. I'm going to give you one shot. But you're no Edomite. You're not my family. God never commanded me not to fight with you. If you're going to deny my request and say no and take out your sword towards us, we'll take out ours too. And I have a secret. We're going to win, because we have God on this one. So that's why by the Edomites, there was more than one request, because we knew the only other option was a roundabout way. Doesn't hurt to ask again. But with the Amorites, I'm not wasting my time asking twice. And that explains some of the other differences. When it came to the Edomites, it says, who sent the messengers? Moses. Why did we say Moses and not the entire Jewish people? You know, there's the general commentary that Moses, that the leader of the Jewish people and the Jewish people are one. So sometimes it could say Moshe, sometimes it could say the Jewish people. It's the same. The leader of the generation and the people of the generation that he's leading are one and the same. But the Rebbe says it's more than that. When it came to the Edomites, they said Moses' name because they wanted to scare the Edomites. They wanted to pressure the Edomites. They should let us through, because they knew that war wasn't an option. So they figured if they say Moshe's name, Moshe, who at that point had a reputation in the region as being a leader. Remember, he was a tough cookie. He led the Jews out of Egypt. He dealt with Pharaoh. He had a reputation. He crossed the Sea of Reeds. They wanted to scare him. It didn't work at the end, but at least that was their hope. When it came to the Amorites, to Sichon, I don't have to scare you. Why would I have to scare you? What's the worst thing you'll do? You'll tell me, I could be nice and dandy to you, and then you'll say no, and I'll go to war with you and I'll win. And so that's what they did. So what they say? They said, if we're not trying to scare the Amorites anyhow, because that's not the point, because we have option number 2, which is to go to war, then at least let's say, Vayishlach Yisrael Malachim. The Jewish people collectively sent messengers, not Moshe, but the Jewish people, because maybe that would be more of an influence on the king of Sichon, on Sichon, the king of the Amorites, to say, they all came together. They're all telling me as a group that they're not going to mess with my property. Maybe I can trust them. When it came to the Edomites, we did everything in our power to influence them, to convince them to allow us through. That's why we said, please. And that's why we told them our history about how we were in Egypt. By the way, we're a group of people. We've suffered enough. We just want to get to our land, right? You try to give people context and tell them more of the story, and you hope for the best. It didn't work. But that's what they were trying to do. When it came to the Amorites, I don't need to tell you my story. I don't need to beg you and say, please. There's no politeness involved. You have to be I have to be careful with my words here. You have to be a total, all the good words I want to use are probably not the right ones to use. You have to be a very, very, you have to be a subhuman. That's a term the Nazis used to use. You have to be a real sick, twisted individual to not let someone walk through your country, even though they mean no harm. Right? They simply just want to get through to get to their destination. And the Amorites were that group, and they paid for it with their lives and their territory. They could have kept their land in the Transjordan, but no, they had to say no to the Jews. And the Jews said, you know what, you say no, we'll deal with you accordingly. We didn't have the option to do that with the Edomites, but with the Amorites, you have one chance at making the right choice and you failed. And that's why, by the way, when the Edomites said no, when Moshe sent the message and the fear tactics didn't work and the convincing didn't work and the Edomites still said no, the Jews tried again. And what do they do the second time? It says, Vayemru Elav B'nai Yisrael, the sons of Israel, the children of Israel said to the king of Edom. So it went from Moshe, but the second time it says the children of Israel, they figured, Moses didn't scare them into it. So maybe if we show them that it's all of us together and that we're all in this together, the Jews, and we're all committing together not to eat from their land and to buy water from them, maybe if we give it as a collective message, it would sell better and it'll change their mind and allow us to go through their land. And it was worth trying because we don't have any other options. But that's why they repeated it. And that's why they repeated their request, not in the name of Moshe, but in the name of the Jewish people as a whole. Because when it comes to family, the Edomites, even though it's our family, it's totally off the rocker, right? Esau was far from anything to be like Jacob. But family's family and God's pledges to family was different. And the expectation from Hashem that we should live up to a different standard when it comes to family. You have to be a mensch to everybody in the world. But it's a BS story when people say, that, are you treating the Jewish people better? Like, Rabbi, why do you write about the Jew? Because I'm a Jew, and I'm a Jew. So I talk about the Jewish people. Who should I talk about? The Tutsis in Rwanda. The Tutsis should take care of the Tutsis, and the Jews take care of the Jews. Doesn't mean we don't have a collective view, a universal view. Any water? It doesn't mean there's no universal view. Of course, we all take care of each other. That's the universal beauty. But to say that there isn't a uniqueness in taking care of our own family, our own Jewish family, or whatever your family is, of course there is. That's what we do. Right? Israel sends people every time there's a tragedy around the world, the Israeli government sends incredible people to deal with all the issues around the world. But they also do that in their own country. You don't give up in your own country because you're taking care of the rest of the world. And so here the Torah is showing us clearly that when it comes to the Edomites, to the family of Esau, we do take them seriously and we do treat them differently because God asked us to. And that's okay. We would have been very kind to the Amorites too, had they said, yes, you can walk through our land. But they didn't. They thought they were tough cookies. And that's when they paid the price for their insanity. But now that brings us to next week's parsha, which gets really fascinating. Next week's Torah portion, as a continuation, talks about how the Moabites are dealing with what they're seeing. So you had the Edomites, the family of Esau, then you had the two giants and their nations, the Bashanites led by Og, and the Amorites led by Sichon. What happens to Og and Sichon? They're both taken out. And what's interesting is that when it comes to Og, Moses gets scared. Now, why would Moses get scared? He just took out the Amorites. He wasn't worried at all. Why, when it comes to Og, was he suddenly scared? He was scared because he remembered that Og was once very helpful to Abraham. All the way back, Og lived for an insane amount of years. And back in the book of Genesis, Og was the one that came and told Abraham that Lot was kidnapped, that his nephew Lot was kidnapped by the kings. And so he gave him an incredible opportunity to save his nephew. And Moses was concerned that maybe that good deed that Og had done hundreds of years earlier would stand by as a defensive mechanism for him, for the good that he did, and therefore God wouldn't let Moses take him out. And what does God say? Al tira, Oisai, don't be scared of him, of Og. because B'yad Chanasati, I have given him into your hands. And Moses indeed is the one that takes out Og, and takes out Sichon. And now the Jews are confronted by a new enemy called Moab. And the verse begins and says, Balak, the son of Tzipor, saw all that God did, all that the Jews did to the Amorites, and the Moabites were petrified of the nation a lot. Rashi tells us, what did Balak see? What did the king of Moab see that freaked him out, that got him scared? So Rashi says, he looked at the two kings that everyone was counting on. Who were the two kings that everyone counted on? Og and Sichon, the Amorites and the Bashanite king. They did not survive the Jews. The Jews took him out. So he says, Anu, if Moses and the Jews can take out those two guys, we're toast. And therefore the Moabites got very, very scared that they would be next. But the wording in the verse seems very odd. Why does it seem odd? Because it says, Balak saw what happened to those two kings. And then it says, because of what he saw, the Moabites got scared. Now, the commentaries ask a question. Why were the Moabites not scared without Balak? Didn't they see the two kings getting taken out? Didn't they hear the same news that he heard? Why would the king be scared, right? Or see something that they didn't see and then allow for the fear to penetrate the people? So that's why Rashi comes along and teaches us that the Jews didn't know. That the Moabites didn't know. We assume, right? And I'm going to say something that's going to sound for a moment like I'm a conspiracy theorist. We assume we always know what our government is up to, the deals that our government makes with different groups around the world. But the truth is, we really don't. Governments do a lot of things. Kings definitely do a lot of things. And they set up systems, many of which we don't know about. And so there was an internal memo that the only people that knew about this memo were the king of Moab and the kings of Bashan and the Amorites, Sichon and Og. What was the deal? We will pay you guys money. We will pay you two giants on the Transjordan, on the east side of Jordan money, and you will be the protection. We'll pay you a tax. You protect us against any invading armies. But the people of Moab didn't know that, right? Because the king of Moab, Balak, didn't want the people to know that because that means he's vulnerable. He wanted to protect himself. They shouldn't think he needs anyone else. So he paid them off quietly to protect them. Then he looks one day and he sees the news. He gets the New York Times or the Journal, and he looks and goes, oh my gosh, my protectors were taken out by a group called Jews and a guy named Moses. Now he's petrified because he knows he doesn't have what it takes to protect his people. So he goes and tells his people that, by the way, we had this protection system set up. I'm sorry to break it to you now. I should have told you in the beginning, but we had this system set up from before that these two guys are going to protect us. And they were taken out, which means we are vulnerable right now. So instead of being a leader and protecting his people and showing strength, Moab, like a little kid, like a cat next to a mouse, goes to his nation, and not only does he tell them how scared he is, he actually makes them extremely scared. He brings fear and trepidation to his own nation when they didn't need that. There's no reason for that. There was nothing to gain from that. It's not like Balak said we should go to war with the Jews. They knew that wasn't an option. He only hires Bilam to curse. He could have done that quietly. But instead, he freaks everyone out. Fear. You know that fear tactic that we've been speaking about during COVID, during monkeypox, during everything. Everything today is fear. You have to scare everybody into believing whatever. I'm a big fan of education. Educate people. Scaring people is a horrible thing. I mean, it's the media's full-time job. If you, for example, I was telling Mendel this earlier, if you watch the news, you would think that every airport has 10,000 flight cancellations. Except as someone that unfortunately had to fly a lot the last 3 weeks, and I was on probably 12 flights, only one of which was canceled, and I was rebooked, and 3 hours later I got to where I need to go. 95% of flights are going, but that doesn't sell. Right? If the headline was 96% of flights are flying on time, who's going to read the news? If you say hundreds of flights have been canceled, that sells. Fear is a great seller. Balak went to his people and freaked them out. He scared the living daylights out of them. That's not leadership, that's cowardice. He didn't need to do that. There was nothing to gain from it. Moshe, on the other hand, was the polar opposite. Right? Moshe Rabbeinu, when it came to Og, he was very, very scared. Right? He was scared that Og's good deeds would protect him. Right? The good deeds he did for Abraham would protect him, and even later in life. And so he didn't tell his people that. He kept it deep in his heart. In the words of the commentaries, Amuk belibo, he kept it in the recesses of his heart. Only because God said, Al Tira, don't be scared. We have some indication that he might have been scared. Why is that? Why did Balak have to run and scare his whole people and Moses not? Says the Rebbe that righteous people control their emotions. It's one of the basic foundations of Tanya that the Alter Rebbe in his magnum opus of Tanya talks about, that a human being, the more righteous you are, the more you control your emotional outbursts. Wicked people, sinful people, arrogant people aren't capable of doing that. If they have a fear, they need everyone to know about it. They need to make everyone scared with them to make them feel comfortable. Righteous people don't. Moshe did not need to make himself vulnerable to his people. On the contrary, he knew that this was a moment where they needed leadership. They did not need to know that in his heart he was scared of Og. That would demoralize them. He's a leader. There are times when you're not supposed to show that vulnerability, because then it takes the person down with you, the people you're meant to protect, the people you're meant to lead. And if there's something you got to deal with it internally. You don't have to scare the whole nation. There's a reason why in every White House there's something called the Situation Room. And that's why not everyone's supposed to be invited there. And if it wasn't for the media, we wouldn't be invited there. Let them deal with whatever scary things they got to deal with privately in the Situation Room without scaring the entire nation. Moshe Rabbeinu understood that whatever his vulnerabilities are deep down in his heart, even in the most scary, vulnerable times, fearful times, he has to be in full control of himself, and he has to be able to give the people the strength and courage that they need to get through the challenging time without the extra dose of fear. So basically what we see is that in each situation, Moshe is dealing according to what's needed. With the Edomites, he had no choice. War wasn't an option. We try, and it doesn't work. We go around the bend. With Sichon, we try. They don't listen. We go to war. With Og, he had some fear inside of him, but he didn't let anyone know. And when push came to shove, God gave him the dose he needed to go and take out Og directly. Balak, on the other hand, the king of Moab, was a coward, an absolute coward, who at his most, the test of his leadership, the moment when he could have been tested whether he's a good leader or not, he failed miserably and turned out to be not a leader, but a coward that brings fear to his entire people. And I share this. I think it's always fascinating that we read the portions of Chukas and Balak, these two Torah portions, always around the time of the year that we commemorate and celebrate the days of Yud Beis and Yud Gimel Tammuz, the 12th and 13th of Tammuz. So this Shabbos is the 10th of Tammuz, and that means Monday and Tuesday is going to be Yud Beis, the 12th and the 13th of Tammuz. And in the year 1927, in the spring of 1927, in Leningrad, in St. Petersburg, Russia, the previous Chabad Rebbe of Yosef Yitzchak was arrested by the NKVD, by the various branch of the KGB. He was arrested and taken to he was taken to Spalerka. Spalerno was the worst jail in Leningrad. They put him there. They were going to put him to death. And one of the things that's interesting is that he understood right away what kind of level of decree was being held against him. For spreading Judaism, the communists wanted to totally eradicate, they wanted to kill him. But he knew he had a mission to accomplish, and he knew that if he showed fear to his followers, to his Hasidim, it would demoralize them and they would be incapable of doing what needs to be done. So instead, he showed them strength. He said, I am not going to kowtow, I'm not going to bow to the communists. I'll stand in their face and tell them the truth that Yiddishkeit, that Judaism will continue to be flourishing and will continue for generations. And by the way, eventually, through a lot of intervention, he was freed and he had to leave Russia. But he writes in his own diary, I have the diary, the quote from the diary right in front of me. And it's right up the alley with what we were just speaking about. He says, Eineni rashai lakshay machshavos ke'elu. I'm not allowed to think these types of thoughts, hapoyelos nemichas ruach, which lower my spirit, which take away my spirit to fight on. Liyos az v'takiv bli ches. I have to be strong and courageous without fear. L'daber b'sofa bara. I have to speak in clear language. He's writing in his own diary how he's going to deal with the communists. Even though inside he felt fearful, I can't allow that to penetrate. I can't allow it to take over. I got to be strong. Then he says, I'm obliged not to become shocked and bent out of shape, not to become fearful, so I could stay my ground, not to turn to the right or to the left, from the decision I've made, to give the pride of Jacob to be desolated and demoralized by these communists. I will not allow it. And that was an internal decision made by him that as a leader of the Jewish people in exile in Russia, not to allow the fear to penetrate. You cannot take on an enemy, whether an internal enemy or an external enemy, if you are fearful. That's why in the Torah and Deuteronomy, when it talks about the laws of war, it says that if you're yari v'rachlev, if you're fearful and you're weak, go home. If you can't stand the heat, get out of the kitchen. Balak couldn't stand the heat, which means he didn't deserve one day to be king of Moab. Moshe, despite his fear, despite his vulnerabilities, knew he cannot express that at that moment because that wouldn't be empowering, that wouldn't be an impressive thing of humility. It would be demoralizing. And part of being a Jewish leader, part of being a leader altogether, is not to demoralize, but to bring spirit and courage to the people you're leading, to uplift them so that they too can fight on. It's an incredible lesson in leadership. It's an incredible insight into who Moshe Rabbeinu was. And perhaps most importantly, it's an incredible lesson on individuality. There are different types of foes that we encounter in our life. Some days you'll encounter foes that are like cousins, the foes that are family, whatever that means in your particular life. The Edomites of your life. Some days you'll find the Amorites. Sometimes you'll encounter Og. You'll encounter a Bashanite and you're going to wonder if you could even encounter and deal with that guy because, oh my gosh, he has so much connections from before, from the good deeds. And then you'll meet cowards like the Moabites. The Torah is teaching us that each one of those need to be dealt with internally and externally according to who they are, meaning treating them according to the situation, not generalizing. And that is the ultimate way in which a Jew can serve God properly, because we're dealing with each situation in the way God intends us to deal with it, and therefore having the outcome that God intends for us as well. So next time you meet an enemy that seems formidable, don't be so. Remember, God goes with you to war when you're meant to go to war. And when you're not meant to go to war, you just need to go a roundabout way and you'll totally outsmart the enemy. He's waiting. There's some enemies that are waiting for you to go to combat. But you're smarter than them. You realize this is not one to fight. This is one to ignore. You try once, you try twice to get an in. You don't get an in, you go a roundabout way and you'll get to your destination without them. Have a fantastic week. Look forward to seeing you back next week. Gesundheit and Freiligkeit, good health, and good joy. Next Wednesday, believe it or not, we might have 2 weeks in a row in the summer. It's a miracle in itself.
I'm not going to be on a plane next Wednesday. Mashiach's coming. Sei gesund. I'll see you later. Ciao. Chagai, Margot, how we doing?